Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm your streamer. And we, on this stream, normally talk about building a software project using the Python language and the Django web framework. I think it'll be a little different tonight. That's not my main plan. If you were following last stream, I was working on configuration tools and cleaning up settings and doing all that sort of stuff. But today is going to be a much different flavor because I've made the decision to shut down my side SaaS project, and for a variety of reasons. And what I'm hoping to do this evening in this stream is to have like a retrospective of what happened and why I'm planning to shut things down, and what I learned on the way. I think that's the more interesting part. So hope you'll join me in that conversation. Have some questions if you can. If not, that's okay. I have plenty of thoughts along the way, as this is something that's been weighing on me for a little while. But if you want to keep in touch with me, there are plenty of ways to do that. There's a link up above at mattlehman.com where you can sign up for my email list, follow me on Twitter at mblehman, all sorts of ways you can keep track of me. I'm happy to chat with you on Twitter and answer your questions in the chat if you're here live. So yeah, thanks, Coco Crazy. I do have another project in mind, which I'll get to a little later. But I think it would be like informative to like cover all the things that did not go well in this project of mine that I started. So yeah, if you like the content, please like, subscribe, do whatever, whether you're catching this later on YouTube or following this on Twitch. I also have a Patreon if you are so inclined and want to support me financially, which you can find more information on my website above. So let's take a moment to talk about what's going on. So I guess I'll drop some notes. We're talking about failure of the biggest kind, of shutting something down. So I'll preface this with what is the product, because a lot of my streams for the last months, frankly, have been so deep into the technical that I've been ignoring the domain that it's in. So some people who might be coming in later might not even know what this thing is. This is the service that I was producing. It's called College Conductor, and it's meant to help college admissions people who are trying to help students get into college with doing that job of tracking dates and all that stuff. It was born out of something that my wife was doing, frankly. My wife was an independent educational consultant, and she would help people figure out what's the right school for them, help them do SAT and ACT prep. If you're in the US, you know what those tests are. So is meant to support her business, because she was really frustrated by the tools that were available to her. She thought they were too complicated. They were kind of clunky. They felt dated. So I thought, well, I do web development. Let's give this a go. And so I started down this path of planning for this tool, of what is it I wanted it to produce, and what was the outcome that I was hoping for. So the big vision that I had for this is maybe this becomes a viable tool that not only my wife would use to help support her business, but then I could get a number of clients that would be in that ecosystem of independent educational consultants, perhaps even college guidance counselors at public high schools, dealing with the sheer volume of students that they have to deal with. And that was the plan, to start something for her and then scale it up and make it work for other people, and hopefully get the ball rolling. And the short version of the story is that did not ever materialize. Even for my wife, like I never got the tool to a point where even she was wanting to use it. So that's like probably failure number one. So what I'm going to do is, knowing that that's the vision for what this was intended to be, talk about the pieces that broke down along the way, and why I think they broke down, and what I could have done differently to help have made the tool more successful. So I've got, instead of looking at code today, we're actually going to look at a Google Doc file where I will jot down some thoughts here as they come to me. So I'm going to try and stay technical to keep it interesting, because I know you're not necessarily here to listen to me talk about business plans and stuff, but there is an aspect of developing a software as a service that has to consider the market, and failure to do that, if you're really wanting to be successful and create a product that the other people will use, can't be ignored, and we shouldn't ignore it. Being a solo entrepreneur, solo developer has a lot to it. So let's start with the technical stuff first, because it's kind of easier to chat about, and then we'll dig into some of the other aspects. So I took some initial inspiration when I started this project from this blog post about choosing boring technology. This is a great post. Yeah, we're gonna get into ditching Ember and all that stuff as well. That's a good point, Teagle. That's definitely what I'm going to look into. So I got into this post about choosing boring technology, and it's a good post. I'll drop the link in here in the chat. In fact, I'm going to put it in my retrospective document, which I might share later. But the idea behind this post, it is like it sounds like. It's like saying choose tried and true technology that no one would judge you. Like that saying of nobody gets fired for choosing IBM or picking Java or whatever it is, like the kind of a cliche saying. But it's that idea sort of personified, in that when you are choosing the technology that's going to drive your product, making these kind of decisions to play it safe lets you focus on the domain. And so I really valued that. And so when I started this project, I had a mind to keep my stack pretty comfortable with things I knew. That meant I wasn't going to pick a different language. So even though at the time I think I was reading a bunch about Elixir and it seemed really cool, I wasn't going to go down that path, because I wasn't a professional Elixir developer, and I didn't want to cut my teeth on it to start that journey. So that was part of it. So I stuck with Python and Django, and stuck with a traditional relational database of Postgres. I used technologies that I knew about, like a Nginx for a load balancer. I made a lot of these choices. But one of the things that is in here is this notion of innovation tokens, which I thought was a really interesting concept. And I believe the guy's name is Daniel, or Dan, who wrote this post, describes this idea that when you're making your business, you have a certain amount of technology that you can infuse that is maybe outside of that boredom realm, and that needs to be handled carefully, because if you take on too much risk and take on too many things, then your product and project is likely to fail, because it will never all come together. And so I thought that for my innovation token, and he has this idea of token being a limited thing that you have that you can spend on a given project. So my initial architecture that I had in mind was to spend my innovation on picking Ember. So Ember.js is meant to be this framework. Sorry, it's not meant to. It is. It's a super robust framework. There's a huge community. It is a good tool, but it is a tool that I picked not really, like, having dabbled in the documentation and not being proficient at it. So my thought process was, I want to make a system where I have all of my server-side stuff is purely a RESTful API with API endpoints to do communication, and that what I'm delivering as the experience to my clients is an Ember app that can be deployed as static files and then can talk to the API. So that was the vision. And here's, I guess, where I'll. So let's see, what did I do? I spent an innovation token on Ember. And the hope was that that would pay off, and that it would provide a really slick user experience of, because what I was going for is, my wife described it, the tools that she would use, as super clunky, and they just looked like they came from the year 2000 and weren't designed well, and the not aesthetically pleasing, and all of that. So I thought, okay, if I can make a slick single page app using Ember, then I can provide a very nice experience that might entice people to use the product. So what I didn't anticipate about Ember was the learning curve to start with. So it is a system where you have to learn. It's kind of like Ruby on Rails in this way, that you have to learn a fair amount of conventions. That's even their mantra of convention over configuration. And presumably, if you do, you start to become really proficient at it, and it can be a big power advantage to you. And I see that. I can get that story, given that you're enough time on it. For me, it didn't never materialize that way. Because this project was always sort of a side project, I was never devoting like weeks of my time sitting in Ember, like really banging my head on it to learn the tools. So it just meant that like I never learned it quite as well. And I think I also happened to hit on Ember at this weird sort of inflection point in its history, where it was migrating off of the 1.x line and onto the 2.x, and there were some transitions that were not super graceful. For instance, part of the pitch at the time was this component model is coming. It's so close, and that it never materialized in the time that I used it, which was disappointing. But it wasn't even the biggest issue that I ultimately had with Ember. What I experienced by using Ember and this architecture, where I had an API and I had a client, was not only the learning problem, but it was I'll call it a double implementation problem. And what I mean by that is, anytime I created a new model in my system, so College Conductor is all about schools, right? So one of the things that I needed to be able to represent was a school, and search for schools that a student might add for the list of schools and universities that they're interested in attending. So I would do the modeling for a school in Django, and I was super comfortable with that REST framework. I was using Django REST framework, which is a great tool, and it would let me tear through that, and I'd get it done. And awesome, like it's all 100% code coverage. It's great. But then what I found would happen is, because of Ember Data's model, which is their data layer, is called Ember Data, I would do the same modeling a second time on the client side, because the data format of JSON API, which is a specific protocol, I guess I'll bring it up. So I'm not just referring to something generic. I'm referring to the spec of JSON API. It's a way of structuring a data payload. I won't go into too much of the detail there, but in order to make Ember Data ingest the data from my API properly, I had to basically make the model over again on the client side. And to me, this felt like a massive time sink. So I would have all of my energy devoted. I just got my API done, and then because I never quite got over the full learning curve of Ember, I would get to the Ember side and I'd get dramatically slowed down in doing the rest of the actual implementation. Whereas if I had done it with say a Django template and already had the model, I'd only do the modeling once, and just do it once and get all the benefit from there. So that ended up being a something that slowed me down a lot. And I ultimately made the challenging decision at some point to completely remove Ember. Like, if you go to the College Conductor repository today, there is no vestige of Ember anywhere anymore. I mean, there's a lot of files in here. It might be hard to determine that. But if you go back in the history, you actually might be able to see it. Let's look at the insights. You can probably see the maybe it's the, what's one of these? The code frequency? Yeah, okay. So one of these, it's probably this, it's either this big spike at 2017. No, it's more likely this one where it's just a massive amount of deletion. That's probably the time frame that I removed Ember. And so I made the hard call to basically rewrite the entire front end of my application to use pure Django templates. And the amazing part about that is, like, the rewrite itself took a day or two. Like, it was a shockingly short amount of time for me to get that done. And I think it illustrated to me that I made the wrong call here. I bought into this framework thinking that the slick experience was important, but if I had stopped to think about it, like, I still, like a year and a half later, was not getting my wife, who was my first customer, to use the tool because I didn't have enough built out. So it wasn't reaching that minimum viable product stage. And I think if I had started the entire application right from the get-go using a simpler technology stack that may not have had the bells and whistles of the slickness of Ember, that I just would have gone a lot faster. And so so there's a loss of velocity in implementing multiple places. So that was a big issue. And there were a bunch of things that I just hit along the way that, like, I used Bootstrap, like the site. You can probably even tell, although I did customize things a little bit, but it's very easy for someone who uses a lot of Bootstrap to see, oh yeah, this is Bootstrap components and stuff. And for whatever reason, the technology that is used to build Ember, and I was just having a heck of a time getting all of, like, the CSS stuff wired together. So the technology integration was tough. That's the way I'd phrase that. So that was, like, kind of the big failure number one is essentially the TLDR of this whole thing is I over-architected my initial solution. So if you had a lesson to learn from that, like if you're starting a new project, don't over-architect. Don't overthink it. Start with, don't be crude. I mean, you're not putting things together with duct tape, hopefully, but think of that optimal solution that you might want someday, and then pare it back a lot. Would be that's the way I'd think about it. So there were, and I think that a lot of that stems from spending that innovation token, and I didn't realize how many innovation tokens were actually embedded in this choice of Ember. Because if this concept of innovation tokens and being a fixed quantity rings true, then there were actually a lot of things that I didn't know. It wasn't just Ember. It was learning JSON API, using REST framework in earnest, because I had used it kind of casually before, but not really dug into it. Fixing, like, a bunch, like, during this time frame, I became the maintainer of Django. Here it is, Django JSON API, because there was a package that I encountered that was, like, broken and wasn't letting me use Ember. So I had to come in here and fix stuff and wear the maintainer hat for a good year, until it was working in the right environments and the right Django versions. And like, I took on a lot of tech burden in order to support this mode. And had I not selected Ember at all, I mean, I enjoyed working on this project, and I think I did some good for the community by being part of this and helping to revive this for other folks that need it. But it wasn't ultimately fruitful for my software. So that's I don't want to slam on Ember. Like it's a really good tool, as I've said many times. But I think you have to be either in a team that is already has enough people to take it on to manage that complexity of having to do a back end and a front end. Minimally, it sounds like you need at least two people to manage doing that if you're going to bite the bullet on having to deal with that extra amount of code. Um, or you just have like been doing it for years and you're super well versed in it, and if that's you, more power to you. So that's Ember. The next thing that I think I want to look at is deployment. And it's kind of ironic given that like I have spent months improving deployment. I went through this entire long process of making Ansible simpler, and my next project I think will be one that I will probably actually, I'm not probably, I'm planning to use on Heroku as a platform as a service. I've said this in a bunch of my blog posts that you might have seen or read about, like where I write about alternatives to Docker and things. Like I have this big sidebar that says, hey, platform as a service is a really great thing because what it's doing is saving you the time so that if you have a software as a service that you're starting out and it is going to fail, maybe it's not a good idea ultimately, then not wasting your time building up all the infrastructure will let you focus on the real problem at hand and discover it's going to work out or not. And then if it does, and you need to cut cost and like get off of Heroku if in case it's becoming crazy expensive, then you do that. But time is such a valuable thing, especially when you think about, I'm a well-paid software engineer in my day job. If I considered all of the hours that I invested personally into making my stuff work on a DigitalOcean droplet, like it's just not even comparable to like the $7 that it would have been as a Heroku hobby app to start, because that would have worked. So deployment. What do I say? Don't do it? Question mark? I'm not sure. That might be too strong, but definitely, again, resist the urge to over-architect or try and have all the control. Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it, because that's the trap that I fell into. So I want to include a section down here that we'll not talk about yet, but I want to talk about like opportunity cost and the actual cost. I will show you the spreadsheet that I use to track this and how much it actually cost me to do this in terms of like real dollars. But we'll save that for a little bit. So yeah, what did I learn from deployment? I did learn a ton from this whole project. Like that's the on the upside of this is that I have become a more capable developer, because at each step along the way, I was learning new things. So there's totally value if you're wanting to start up a side project and you're less interested in becoming a raging financial success, like you're not trying to quit your day job and make this your thing, then going down this route of doing it all yourself, starting up your own droplets, starting up your own deployment process, picking different technologies to explore, that's totally fine. I'm not going to slam that, because that is the path that I walked down. And I learned an unbelievable amount, because when you're a single person working on a SaaS project, you have to. I learned about Postgres backups and what a write-ahead log even means, and like all this stuff that I never thought that I would have to do. But at the same time, I question whether it's long-term valuable for me. It may not be. Okay, so I'm kind of jumping all over the place. Let's get back to this deployment story for a minute. So deployment, I used Ansible to do deployment, and Ansible is a good tool in a lot of ways. I don't know that if I'd pick it again, especially as we start to move to a world where it's easier to deploy things like containers, or it's easier to bundle your stuff together. Like if you wanted to do a Shiv app, like I demonstrated. In those worlds, Ansible, it's very procedural in what it does. Like if you run, the playbooks are designed to run linearly and modify in-place systems, and you can get more complex flows that can do stuff with containers, but I don't know that it's really the right tool for a lot of projects. So Ansible is a procedural and somewhat heavy tool. It's a powerful tool, but again, it comes at a cost. There's a lot to learn. I've had my fights with Ansible along the way. Of there are things that should seem like they're easy to do, but then they're not. And testing infrastructure is challenging. Like you'd have to basically, I would have to do a deploy to even test a certain play right in the middle of everything. So it's a sequence of iterating through a lot of steps over and over again. It was all challenging. To add even more complexity to that setup, I used Vagrant as my staging environment, and I did that primarily for cost savings. I was being super cheap with this project. I didn't want to invest. I wanted to invest as little money as possible, is the short version. So rather than have a droplet for staging on DigitalOcean and a droplet for production, I opted to go with having Vagrant act as that middle tier between not local development, but not pushing all the way out to production either. And that worked, but it also had its problems along the way that were unique to that environment, because again, it was a different technology. I think the theme that I'm getting out of this is like I over architected it at a lot of different steps, and I made frankly, like, bad, if I wanted to be successful at this, they're bad economic choices, because I would end up using my time rather than just paying $5 more a month. And okay, I understand not everybody's in a financial liberty position to have that kind of money that they can spend on a side project. And so if you have more time than money, that's the trade-off you can make. But I'm becoming less convinced that it would be worth my time. So those are some of the things that I learned about deployment along the way. And yeah, it's another thing that slowed me down. So I think that's another theme that I get out of this whole process is slow velocity. And velocity, if you're not like a regular software developer, is just, I mean, hopefully you understand the basic concept from physics of how fast something is moving. But when we talk about it in software development, it's usually describing how fast a team is able to complete work. I happen to be a team of one, but it's how fast can I get work done with this project. So that was something that overall, because of a number of decisions I made, it really bit me. Okay, so those are things, those are choices, those are like technology choices that I did, and I want to spend a little bit of time still in the realm of technology, but talking about this idea of the wrong focus. So some of this was born again out of using Ember as my initial choice, but I can't even give you like a screenshot because, short of like going back to a really old version of my clone and trying to build stuff, which is just not worth the time here tonight. Um, but now think about any software as a service that you visit. Um, there is a notion of a landing page, it's the place where you're not signed in yet, um, and they're trying to sell you on what that is. And my initial landing page was because I was so bought into this idea of Ember that I used Ember itself for the landing page, and it was atrocious. It was so bad. Like it would be kind of an embarrassing thing to go back and look at. And I'm not, I'm my landing page that's here is okay, but I still designed it myself, and so there's some lessons about this that I can take away. Um, yeah, I've used Vue at my last job, and it's a good tool. And actually, we're using it. So Doctor on Demand, where I work today, uses Angular 1.x, but we're in the process of migrating to Vue because we don't want to get on the Angular 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever number they're on now, because it's such a different model. But it's a good tool for sure. But getting back to this idea, this landing page, like I'm not convinced that a JavaScript single page application is a good landing page choice, because I mean, I hit a bunch of problems. For instance, I created this thing, and immediately I had the problem of, well, this is not something. This is less true today because Google has gotten better, but at the time, it was certainly true that Google's web crawlers had a really hard time with single page applications. So essentially, my landing page in the world was hard for a web crawler to crawl and learn about my content. So that kind of sucks from the discoverability point, and just isn't great. So, and additionally, like I've got this little drip, and get on my email list kind of widget here. So things that are designed to help landing pages weren't accessible because those little JavaScript snippets, they don't work that well with single page applications because most companies don't use them. So what did I learn? So in my landing page focus was all wrong in that the JavaScript was unsuccessful and difficult to manage. The industry tooling for it didn't work. So that was a downside. And bad SEO at the time. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely ways that you can make SEO work with single page apps. You can do server-side rendering stuff in JavaScript apps so that that when it's served and something is crawling the site, it gets that static content. But again, it gets back to that core subject of over-architecting, because I didn't want to have to do that. So I just had this wrong focus on the landing page, and that was kind of the front door that I wanted to present a good face, because I initially wanted to not just satisfy my wife as a client for my site, but also be able to reach out and market to other consultants and other people in the college industry, and I just wasn't doing it. So I think I learned pretty quickly that landing pages, there are tons of services. So again, it's if you are doing this to try and be successful in a hurry, then don't build your own landing page. Use something like Lead Pages, which is entirely designed to make landing pages that have nice designs, are done by professional designers, where you have a template and you're filling in your copy, and they already do like tracking. this is not an ad for lead pages. It's just an example of one tool that I know of that you can do this stuff with. But get your focus in the right place, I guess, is what I'm trying to say with this little vignette of talking about landing pages. So that was one area where I had the wrong focus for sure, and led to a not great use of my time. So I've talked about Ember being a hard use of my time, deployment being a hard use of my time, even the bits that I focused on when I was building out, because I didn't know what I was doing, I made them harder. What else did I focus on? Oh, I'd almost even forgotten. So getting back to an innovation token, I spent an innovation token. I told you that my current site uses Bootstrap. This is another thing that it didn't start this way. I used, oh gosh, I'm blanking out on the name of it now. What are the CSS frameworks? Does people know? It wasn't Foundation. It was the other one that wasn't BOMA. Semantic UI. Yeah, Tailwind is what I like these days. I'm really a big fan of Tailwind, but I started with Semantic, and Semantic is fine. In the end, I decided its model didn't really work for me, but I spent an innovation token on using Semantic UI for CSS. And so it meant I was learning yet another thing. So if I had just selected Bootstrap from the start because I had known it at the time, yeah, my site would have looked a little bit cookie cutter. But again, like I had the wrong focus. I was focused too much on what I envisioned the final end product would be, and not what I needed to develop. Like I needed to make something minimally viable. People who talk about SaaS, they talk about MVP all the time. I don't know if y'all are into doing SaaS stuff, but it stands for minimally viable product. Am I spelling that right? Nope. Viable. And it's true. Like that's what you need to get to. And so it doesn't have to be gorgeous. It doesn't have to be 100% optimized. There's a lot of things that are there. Again, getting back to here's another one for the deployment category. I needed an HTTPS. That was something I knew that I had to have in order to make something I could sell, get people to sign up with, and I wasn't about to buy a cert for a year long because I think that process is stupid. But I used Let's Encrypt, which is a great certificate authority. Like I think that they do amazing work to provide good quality HTTP. Well, not good quality; they're all the same. But to provide HTTPS certificates freely available to people. But again, that's another thing that I had to invest engineering time in order to hook up right. That I walked all the way through that myself, setting up the various cron jobs to look for new certs and hook that into Nginx and do the necessary performance tuning to make sure that my rating make sure that my Nginx configuration was sufficiently hardened. So that's a good one to note. Hardened Nginx configuration. So that was another time suck. So if you're keeping score of the reasons why I failed, I picked, and keeping track of innovation tokens. I think the guy even says over here that you can have like maybe 3. So I've got Ember, Let's Encrypt, Django REST framework, and JSON API and all that stuff. Semantic UI, landing pages not working. Like none of these things are working in my favor. I think I was also too focused on like the initial user experience before I even got to minimum viable product. And what I mean by that is like I focused on, um, yeah, I had the wrong initial focus on collecting email addresses. So I'm a long time listener of Startups for the Rest of Us, which is it's a great podcast. Uh, for the rest of us. So it's a podcast that follows a guy named Rob Walling and Mike Tabor. They're two individuals here, and they just talk about like being a bootstrapper and building your own business and all of the stuff that goes with that. And Rob's product and one that he actually sold a couple years ago is this one that just popped up on us here, Drip. And Drip is for collecting email addresses and doing email campaigns and really adding a lot of smarts to once you have someone's email address, how to reach out to them. And that's great, but it assumes there, and they talk about this, so like I should have known this. They assume at a certain level that you have traffic, that you're getting email addresses. So we're gonna look at marketing failure. I'll put that one down here because that's actually it's probably one of the biggest ones of all, because it directly impacts what is minimally viable. So I got down this road of implementing these technologies. I even went so far, like I wanted to make it possible for people to like sign up and create an account through Stripe, like with the whole bit, like paying for stuff and all of that. And I think that was, in hindsight, really, again, another waste of time. I definitely could have gotten into a mode where I made just enough login stuff to protect it from not exposing it to the whole world and slamming my server, and work with a small group of people and just punt on all of the payment gateway stuff and collecting money from Stripe. That was just totally in the wrong direction. So in my desire to have something be self-service and make something that can be accessible, like I wasn't focusing on the product. And I guess even here today, I haven't really explained the product itself. So the one thing about College Conductor and what it was intended to do was to collect dates from colleges. And you might have heard the saying, do things that don't scale. I think it was maybe Paul Graham that said that, but I might be misquoting or misattributing to Paul Graham, but maybe I'm doing it right. I'm not sure. But the way I was going to do this was, as people signed up and started to add colleges for their students, I was going to be, the man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz style, who was actually going out to those college websites and looking up what are the admissions deadlines for Harvard, Yale, whatever, and setting that into the app so that I would have that data. So it's going to be like a just-in-time data fetching, which could have worked. And the plan was basically do it just in time and then figure out, okay, that's a school that somebody actually cares about. Let me go implement the automation to scrape that particular site or see if they have an API that I can access to find the date associated with that. So that was the theory. But getting down to it, like I put all this engineering effort into the scaffolding of the apps and things that like long term could have made it successful, but I was missing the heart. I was missing the minimum, the viable part, like something that people would care about. And I think the reason I was missing that is getting down to the subject of marketing failure. The only person I ever talked to who was in college consulting um, about this product and got like customer feedback was my wife. That was clearly a failure. Um, and as someone who was driven at that time to hopefully produce something that was financially viable, that is definitely not the way you'd want to go. You would need to, or I think, and this is true. Like you can get this advice in a lot of places. This is not just me regurgitating this, but you got to talk to real people to see if there's even a market for it. So I didn't talk to the market. I did the typical developer thing and thought, if you build it, they will come kind of concept, and or I'll figure out marketing later. And it doesn't work that way. That's not how industries work. I've been, I know this through some personal experience. Like I have my own website. I write about Python a lot. I've been trying to build up community there, and even through very proactive marketing and going on Twitter and writing regular blog posts, doing content marketing, all that stuff, trying to add value to that community, it takes a ton of work. And so there's probably at least 50% of the work that I was not doing that all should have gone to marketing it if I really wanted to reach the college market. And that just wasn't happening. So if you have a serious idea that you really want to see it be a financial success, go to your market. Go talk to people. Go cold email people, cold call people if that's what you have to do. Hopefully you have better channels than that. And that's a lesson that a lot of people like. How do you warm up those channels? And maybe there's some additional reach out like for content marketing. But you have to discover, you have to find product market fit is what the term is. So there was a lack of product market fit because I never got all the features in place that made the tool minimally viable for even my wife as that first customer. And then I didn't have any kind of funnel of traffic to even consider the tool. And I would do things, I would make sure that my SEO was good, and I could search around for, I would periodically do a vanity search on College Conductor and see how it would do on ratings. And I think if I search for College Conductor over here today, it is up there now. It's so it achieved that level of success from the Google point of view, but this name doesn't mean anything to anyone in that industry, and that is why I never had I mean, I had I had a single trial, and it was actually somebody from this stream. So someone who was watching and thought that the product that I was working on was just a demo project, which turns out he was actually correct in that regard. And he signed up, and it got all the way through the end of the trial, and it charged him. So like I saw all the code that I wrote, it worked, but it wasn't working for the customer that I really cared about. So that was a big problem. So yeah, what should we talk about next? I don't want to drone on for too long. So and it looks like I've been monologuing for the last 52 minutes or so. So let's talk about a few more things and then wrap it up. Let's look at the actual cost. So I've got a spreadsheet here. What did this cost me dollar-wise? This is one area where I think I actually spent the right amount of effort. I did not over-architect my tracking. So I made a Google sheet that just kept track of the dates. And the reason I did this is like I wanted to have a very clear boundary that if I did have success on it, I could track all of the expenses as my, these were business expenses, right? And so what's in here? I mean, you can see the vast majority of them. DigitalOcean's been making $5 a month off of me for a very long time. And it's it's been okay. We'll talk about the opportunity cost thing, but I did say I learned a lot. So having this around, I was okay paying $5 a month to basically self-train on a huge variety of technologies. My other big expenses was a domain name that I'd have to pay for annually. That's the $20 a year thing. Plus, I have an email address that I have to associate with a bunch of accounts. And the only other thing that I think I paid for is my my logo. I went to Fiverr and I said, "Hey, I want something that, since I wanted the motif of an engine conductor, and yeah, got this train and college cap logo put together by somebody. And it's not the greatest logo in the world. And in fact, I even learned lessons about logos here. Like, one thing that you can take away from doing logo design: look for something that is more square than this, because look at this gigantic waste of white space. This is, and also, and this is probably just the poor quality of some, the fact that I chose this particular logo mark and accepted this train as what I wanted. Any smaller than this, and I don't know if you can see the little bars that are on the front of the train there, but any smaller than that, and you actually get into like pixel problems where the stuff that doesn't look right anymore. So it starts to get distorted looking at really small sizes. So the only way to decrease the vertical height was to just scale the whole thing down, but there was a limit of how far I could scale it. So if you are going out there on this SaaS path yourself and paying someone to make you a logo, try and get something that has a dimension that can fit in an icon better, and I think you'll be better served than I was with mine. So those are my literal expenses. Thankfully, I mean, look at the timeline for this. This is, I started paying for stuff for my first domain stuff back in 2016. So that's how long I've been working this project. A very long time, as you can tell. And the total of my entire expenses is $265. So over what, three years, maybe not 3 years yet. No, yeah, like 3.5 years. I've spent way less than $1 a day, like a quarter a day, 30 cents, something around there. So it's not like this has been a very costly endeavor. So from that point of view, I don't feel like I'm at a big loss in the end. But there was definitely cost associated with this that will not be recuperated. I'll put it that way. So that's one thing. So I guess the actual cost, yeah, the time is, yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about, opportunity cost, and that's where the big thing is. Actual cost was fairly minimal considering the timeline. Okay, so as Teaglebuilt noted, the the real cost was an opportunity cost. I've been working on this thing since 2016. It is now 2019. And no customers have been paying at any point in that time frame. So what could I have done in the interim? Like that's what opportunity cost is. It's the if you didn't take economics or an econ class, I took one and I hated it. But maybe you had a better experience than I did. But I did remember opportunity cost is basically the cost associated with the fact that I made this choice. What if I had had the opportunity to make other choices? What else could I have done? Because time is one of our most precious things in life. So, and it's hard to say. Like, I don't know what I would have worked on. Maybe I would have worked on another SaaS. Maybe I would have given it all up and gone and learned how to play guitar or something. Something I don't know how to do today. And it's not. It's super hard to quantify what the opportunity cost would be. So, I know that I lost opportunity developing other software because I was spending it on this tool. So maybe I could have contributed more to open source, or if, let's say, we're speaking at hypothetical terms at this point. What if I had gone down a path where I really had not over-architected the system, kept things super simple? So one opportunity cost path could have been that actually I got customers at some point, and then because I was able to work faster, start to build out a real business, and then get all the learnings that would come out of that. I guess I would write down missed customers because never minimally viable. That's true. The other thing, the over architecture, like I said, I was hoping to make a product that had financial success, and yet I spent no time on the marketing because I spent all that time on engineering. Like the opportunity cost was growing a funnel. Was one part. Let me read your comment here. But like your comment about the hotness of technology, that's a constant. No worries about the long comment. It's a constant struggle. It's like, I think if you're an engineer, or maybe even if you're not, I don't think you have to be an engineer for it to have this quality. We like doing new things, most of us, and so it's very easy to get sucked into, that seems really cool, and so that's probably what I can take away from this college conductor experience. Is like I fell into that trap over and over and over again of, I'm going to do the next thing that I think is interesting, or the next thing that I think will make my architecture more robust. And it's a fairly robust piece of software. Like it doesn't get a lot of usage, so maybe I'm lying to myself, and traffic would prove me wrong. But I think I did a decent job of piecing it all together, even as I shifted it around over the years and ripped out parts and put parts back in. I usually did a pretty good job of cleaning up all of the stuff that was left behind, and all of that. So yeah, there's this strong temptation to be pulled into this stuff, and it can pull you away from your main mission, which in this case was making something that was actually useful for my spouse. So I think that's kind of the big lessons that I want to take out of here. And that is okay. Make it very clear, like, this is not the last time that I will be streaming. So it kind of makes you wonder, well, okay, if I'm shutting down Conductor, what SaaS will I be working on? And here's where I'm going to shift my mentality somewhat. So I have an idea of something in my mind, and part of it is like it's a reflection, frankly, of something that would serve my family. Like I have 2 children, and my wife is moving into doing homeschooling for both of my kids, who are young elementary age children. And so I've thought, like, well, I could make something that would help support her homeschooling tool, or her homeschooling stuff. And again, this might be like, well, this is starting to echo exactly what you did with College Conductor. The difference here, or at least what I'm telling myself, is that I'm going to try and take the lessons that I learned from College Conductor and not repeat them. What we're going to see in the stream over the next few weeks, as well, I'm going out on vacation, but when I come back to streaming, will be focusing on a very simple stack, as simple as I can make it. It's going to be a Django app. So there will be none of the client server side stuff that went on with Ember. The other big category of this over-architecting of deployment, my plan is to use Heroku, because it will handle certificates for me. it will handle like Postgres. Like since I'm going minimally viable and the only person I have to satisfy is a single person right now, I can even operate on free tier stuff. So even though expense is not a big thing for me that I'm trying to avoid this time around, because of my focus, I can still keep it pretty cost contained. And so yeah, I could do Honcho and Procfile. So I will print. So what I actually have gone back and over the last few nights have been playing with the various tech that I am planning to use on this. Like, I spent a lot of time messing with auth and doing other stupid stuff that I'm just not going to do this time. I've matured myself in what I know about the Django ecosystem. So I'm going to use a package called Django All Auth. That'll be a pretty early on one to show you all how to integrate auth in using this package that does a ton of the work for you. I did experiment with Heroku as well, and I found that Heroku, Honcho is cool, but if you're already using Heroku and planning to deploy there's a command called Heroku local that behaves just like Honcho. So it will run that stuff locally and do the same thing that I had Honcho doing. So no need to install Foreman. It's all built into Heroku, which is pretty cool. But that is a good mention to Honcho, which I've mentioned many times. It's a great tool. So if you're doing Procfile style development locally and you're not using Heroku, Honcho is an awesome recommendation. So I want to build out a new product. I'm going to use technology that I feel like I know this time. I'm using Django. I'm going to use Tailwind. So shameless plug for my website. Go sign up at my email list where I write about good fun stuff in technology. But this was all built using Tailwind, and Tailwind to me felt extremely natural as a way to build out styling and stuff. Probably felt pretty natural because my last job used a similar utility style. So I don't feel like I'm going to be learning something new to do styling on the site. So there's two things right off the bat that are already like out and done that will be nice. So it'll let me. I think what it's going to enable me to do is focus on this domain of dealing with homeschool stuff. So I guess I should preface like the thing that I'm actually planning to do is with homeschooling, you have to kind of outline a curriculum, outline when you're going to do things, what activities you're going to do, and there are a bunch of schedule trackers out there, and it's a similar problem to the college space where there are options up there, but they're kind of crummy looking or they're not great. So the other big difference about this mode this time is I am much less concerned with financial success. That's not going to be a priority for me. So we're not going to spend nearly as much time looking at Stripe and trying to integrate payment gateway stuff. Maybe I will someday, but it just won't be the focus. The focus will be on using a minimal set of tools to make something solid and useful that someone will actually want to use. And the goal being convince my wife to use this tool to actually make it the tool that she utilizes for doing homeschooling for my kids, and produce that. And I already have some persuasion to do. She's already indicated to me that like it would have to do a lot of things to do that. So there's a lot of work to do that to make this something useful. So that's my plan to continue this on, and yeah, I hope this discussion today was. It's a bit like airing out the dirty laundry of here's the kind of things that I've learned over 3 years of making a SaaS that didn't go anywhere, and partly it's a little embarrassing, so I'm being pretty open about it. You want things to succeed in life, and it's always a little disappointing where at some point in the near future I'm going to shut down the droplet and just turn it all off. And it's not sad, I guess, but it is a bit like, man, what a bummer. So hope you'll stick around with me on future streams. I think it's kind of fun to, when I started this stream about a year ago, it was a little over a year ago now. You kind of caught me, like I was mid-project, so I had already ripped out Ember, like I had already gone through cycles and cycles of stuff, and I was just showing you, like, here's the snapshot of my world. I'm glad you guys y'all have enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me today. And I think what's going to be exciting about this new project, while there's less of a financial focus, which maybe you don't care about anyway, we'll get to start it from, like, I'm going to walk you through creating the repo, like, which maybe you don't need, but there's nothing that's going to be left up to imagination. I'll probably maybe do little bits here and there offline that are boring, but I really want this to be something that someone could watch and say, hey, here's how you can make an app, and here's how a professional who, I know all these tools, here's how they can do it. So that's where we're headed. Yeah, hope you'll join in. I guess I cheated a little bit. So I lied. I've already lied. Sorry. I did create an app, a new repository, because I wanted to have a place to document my initial thoughts. So I'm a liar already. Maybe I'll delete it, and we'll make a new repository to give you an idea of making sure you know every step along the way. But that's the plan. So if you enjoy this, hope you'll follow. I need to learn the right terminology. I know that one of them is about paying and subscribing. I know I'm not at that stage yet, so I'm not trying to ask for money here. I'm just saying I hope you'll catch up with me on Twitch. If you're coming from YouTube, that you'll give me a like on this video. If you want to get in touch with me, I am MB Lehman on Twitter. You can follow me there. I've got email lists, as I've said. There's a lot of ways that you can follow along. I do try and stream on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And what else is there to say? I won't be streaming for a couple weeks. I'm actually heading out of town, going on some big travel with some family stuff. So I will not be streaming for a while. But when I do get back, probably early December, we'll jump into this new project and hit the ground running. So thank you for joining in today, and hope you have a great night. Take care.